Welcome back to another episode of The Blueprint. I'm your host, Calvin Custance. I'd like to welcome to the show Coach Jon Skladanowski, the head football coach at Fraser High School. He was my head coach, and I'm very excited for you guys to see this interview. Welcome to the show, Coach. All right, so today we have the head coach of the Fraser Ramblers football team, varsity football team, Jon Skladanowski. So welcome to the show, Coach.
Pleasure being here, buddy.
So for those who don't know, I go to Fraser, and you were my varsity coach for 2 years. So when did you start coaching Fraser?
I have two stints at Fraser. I started when I first started teaching back in 2000, and I coached at Fraser from 2000 to 2010. Started off as a JV assistant when I first started. Did that till I do believe 2004, and then the guy that I was with, who was the JV head coach, became the varsity head coach, and I moved up with him and coached with him from 2005 to 2010. Then I moved. I went over to Cousino, coached there for 3 years. Then that group of coaches went to Anchor Bay, so I coached at Anchor Bay for 1 year. And then the job opened up at Fraser in 2015, and I jumped in with both feet trying to get that job, and I was luckily enough, was able to get it. Been there, sir.
And then when was Fraser your first coaching job?
Yeah, Fraser was my first coaching job. I'm an alumni of Fraser. I like to say I took a little hiatus out of Fraser and came right back in. The town sucked me back in, but to be terribly honest with you, I always wanted to come back to Fraser. So I played football and baseball and basketball at Fraser, graduated, and then after college came back and I wanted to coach.
Oh, why'd you get into coaching?
Oh, I always wanted to. Since there's full disclosure that you're one of my players, Coach T.I., I remember him saying to me my senior year, he goes, "I think you are one of the only players I've ever had that wants to be a coach a little bit more than a player." And I'm fascinated with it. Like, I didn't want to just play. And I think you're the same way, by the way, Calvin. Mm-hmm. I was always fascinated about the X's and the O's and why did we do what we were doing? I mean, you play the game and most players, they play their position. They have an understanding of their position. They have an understanding of their unit. But I wanted to know why. And I was so interested in that. And I loved football, and I knew I wasn't going to play college football, but I always wanted to be a part of football. I always tell my teams, you're going to miss your guys next to you. And this is the one sport where you can't call your buddies up and play full 11-on-11 contact with helmets and equipment and everything. This is the one sport you're never going to play again. And boy, did I miss it. I mean, just absolutely missed it. And I just jumped at the chance. There was a teaching job open at Fraser. And as soon as the teaching job was open, it was kind of expected. My former high school coach was the head coach at the time. He goes, "Oh, yeah, you're coming in with us." And the rest is history.
Yeah, the rest is history indeed. So coming out of college, what did you major in and what did you minor in?
In Ohio, they didn't. I am a mathematics major with an education endorsement, and they did not let you have minors in education in Ohio at the time. I don't know if they still do or they don't. I went to the University of Toledo, so I got a math degree. So that's the only thing that I can teach is mathematics. And I always thought to myself, I was always good at mathematics. And I always thought to myself, well, if you want to get a teaching job, it always seems like math teachers are always needed. So that's what I went into.
So for people that want to take a similar or the same route going into college, would you advise coaching? Like, if you want to coach high school, would you advise being a teacher, or like what else? Or could you do that with other jobs?
Well, I mean, if you look at our staff, on the varsity staff, we have two teachers. Me and Coach Daly are teachers. He's in a different district. Coach T.I. works in a educational setting, but he's not a teacher. And everyone else is not teachers. Now, the reason why I would say it's beneficial for you to be a teacher when you are coaching is you can be in the building. and it's an offshoot of what you're doing, but you don't have to be a teacher. There's a lot of great coaches who have great relationships with their players that are not teachers and who are not in the building. It's just something that is a little extra, and I think it helps you get your job, to be honest with you, because I think a lot of schools want teachers that are coaches. So we are there all the time, and it's just not practice time, and that's it.
When you were at Anchor Bay and Cosno, were you still a teacher at Fraser, or did you transfer to those districts?
No, I stayed at Fraser.
Does that create any, like, I don't want to say tension, or like, is it more beneficial to transfer to the district that you're coaching at, or is coaching at a different school okay with
I think it's different. I mean, it depends. When you're coaching at a different school, you care about the kids, and don't get me wrong on this. Coaching at Fraser, I'm worried about my players. I'm worried about my students all day long. Something happens to one of our kids, I'm letting someone contacts me, right? When you coach at a different school, you've got your set of problems or good things at your work, at your teaching job, and then you have a new set at that school. You really don't know what happened during the day. So there's pluses and minuses, I believe, to it. Mm-hmm. It's kind of rushing that I have to worry about kids all day long and just worry about the students, not just your football players. But when you go to the different school, it's, you still worry about them. You just don't have the same effect.
Yeah. So what would you say is the hardest thing that you've come across with coaching?
The hardest thing that I've come across with coaching. When I was younger, it was sometimes you're coaching boys to become young men. So you don't really realize, the age groups that you have when you're talking about different things. And as a varsity coach, and as you get older, you understand it a lot more. Young coaches, if you see young coaches, are usually more black and white, more it's this way or the highway, and it just doesn't work that way on certain things. But when I was younger, I'll take example this year. If one of our players messed up, you got to think about, okay, well, that one's a sophomore, right? Or that one's a senior. There's a difference on figuring out those type of things. So learning how to communicate with your players is not difficult, but it's the most challenging. You got to find a way to be able to communicate with each one of your players. And sometimes it's different. It doesn't mean that you're fair. And when you talk about being fair, fair is not always the same, right? You try to be equal as much as you possibly can, but fair, you might treat one kid one way because they need a kick in the butt. You need to treat another kid with a pat on what type of kid you have. And I think that's the most challenging, is being able to reach certain kids.
Mm-hmm. What is the hardest part about balancing being a teacher, being a coach, and then obviously family life? And how do you find a way to balance that without sacrificing one or the other?
Having a great wife that understands is my first thing. You guys know I have two young kids. I have a 6-year-old and a soon to be 8-year-old girls who aren't going to be playing football, but they love daddy coaching. They love going to the football practices and the football games. They think it's the coolest thing on the planet. It's rough on family life. It's rough because it does take a lot of time off. You have to love what you are doing, and you have to be passionate about what you're doing. And that's a little bit difficult. When it comes to teaching and coaching, I think they're together. I think the best coaches are teachers anyways, whether they're as a job profession or the way they explain things is teaching. Coaching is teaching.
So going kind of along with that, what motivates you as a coach to keep doing what you're doing? And because obviously being the head coach of a high school program puts a lot of time and effort into it. So what motivates you throughout the process?
I love working with the young men. I really do. And I love watching how young men grow through the program. I love seeing the one kid that's a freshman that you go, I don't know if he's going to make it. And then he becomes a senior, and he's a great young man. yes, wins and losses and being competitive. Every head coach and every football coach is competitive as can be and wants to win every single game. But when you sit back and you take the 100-foot view of everything, it's watching young men grow to be what they can be. And I think that thing motivates me more than anything. Of course, there is winning. Of course, there is working, trying to be better in the competition. I mean, no coach didn't get into this without the competition. It's because they love competition. They love going after it. But at the same token, there's other things that are important that you have to make sure that you keep your eye on.
Mm-hmm. How big of a factor does the community play as a coach, whether it's expectations, whether it's like bonding, team bonding, whether it's just like the fans, like how big of a factor do you think it plays?
Well, the community itself is absolutely huge. You have to have their backing. Um, they can make a good season into a special season. Coaches can't do everything that we try to offer for our players and for our program. Parents have to help us out with that, especially in Fraser, which being such a small, tight knit community. I mean, I walk down the street, I know half the people that are there. I mean, I've been here basically my whole life. But having the backing and the support by the school, by the parents, by the community, it is absolutely huge.
Mm-hmm. So, what are some major challenges that you've faced as a football coach so far in your career, and like how do you work those out?
Well, we've had a couple things. We haven't had the best seasons on the planet, and the one thing, we've had some real good seasons, and then we've had some lackluster seasons. And things happen. There's more than one reason why you don't have a good season or you do have a good season. Things have to click. Sometimes things don't go your way. You have to be healthy when you're doing it. Everyone's got to be on the same page. My philosophy is always, first of all, you work harder. If you're not getting the results that you want, you work harder, and you have to try and teach your players how to work harder. They have to understand it. They have to understand how much it takes in order to do something that they want to do. If you want your goals, if you have certain goals, you have to work for those goals. I always tell my players that potential is great. Potential is great, but it's the worst word in football, because potential means you could be that person. Hard work, dedication, commitment makes you into that person that develops your potential into what you're supposed to be. And unfortunately, sometimes students with potential don't see that how hard they have to work in order to get to where they want to be. So working hard, and you try to change it up as much as you possibly can. You have to look at it through a different way. You have to have better ideas. Some things that work for some teams during the years don't work for other teams. So you got to find that route. And the biggest part of a successful team or a non-successful team, you have to make sure that they gel together. And you can't always be with your players all the time, but you have to give them opportunities and situations where they get together, and it's not on the phone, and it's not through Snapchat or anything like that nowadays. You got to get them together, and they get to know each other, because the more you know someone, the more you care for someone. The more you care for someone, the harder you work for that person. The bond becomes stronger. And I think that is the challenges that you have to do, especially when you come off a not so good season.
Mm-hmm. So if your team's struggling during the season, how long does it take for you to shift the offensive, defensive, or just like overall team focus?
Well, I think you have to. You have a package. You have a system in which you do, and you've got to be able to do quite a few different things out of that system. I don't believe in a defense of a week or an offense of a week. I don't think you work all summer, you work all off season. You've got this system that you work. You know that it works for certain things, but if it's not clicking, you have to have something in that system, and you have to make adjustments in that system in order to put your players in the best position to be successful. I don't think you scrap anything during the season. You look at it in the off season. Hey, does this fit our kids? That's one thing that you always have to take a look in the off season. Coaches, but when you get to about December through February, there's a bunch of clinics, a bunch of football clinics where all these coaches will get together and listen. And you try to think about, okay, this is what I have coming next year. What would best suit them, number one, but also it has to reflect me. I have to buy into it. I have to get my coaches to buy into it, and I've got to get my players to buy into it. Well, it's going to have to suit me in order for me to be comfortable with it, in order to sell it to my players, to my coaches. So right now, the things that we run at our level, we've moved around with the defense a little bit, but not too much. It's basically the same base. But with offense, I'm very comfortable with what we have. We can, in our offense, if we are a good running team, we can run the ball out of that offense by just doing a couple things, or we can throw it, or we can do the screen game. But then I think it's more of, where do you have your emphasis on? If something's not working, you have to change your emphasis of what kind of team you can do within your system.
Mm-hmm. So say one specific part of the offense is working, for example, the run game. What do you do as a coach, more the X's and O's side? What do you do as a coach to try to counter that when they're expecting the pass?
I'm sorry, ask that question again for me, please.
So when a part of your offense, for example, the run game, isn't working, what do you do to try to outman the defense when they are expecting the pass? Try to catch them off guard.
Well, you give them new formations, you give them new motions, you run the same type of plays different ways is one way to do it. You try to confuse them by alignment. Then you try to sneak in that run. You try to, if you're not doing well running the ball, you still have to show it, because they can't sit there. You can never let a team just sit there and know exactly what you're doing on every single play. So what you try to do it out of different formations. We run one pass play quite a bit, and we run it out of deuce. And then the next week we're going to run it out of trips. And the next week we're going to run it out of motion. And next week we're going to run it out of heavy. Or next week we're going to run it out of bunch. But we're going to run that pass probably 6-7 times a game, because it's our bread and butter, and it's successful. And teams know that we're going to run it, but with a little motion here, or someone else moving here, or even switching up the responsibilities, it confuses people. Because at the end of the day, you're playing high school football, and kids are worried about who they're covering. And you change things, something they've practiced all week, you change that, you hopefully get a jump on what they're thinking.
Mm-hmm. So, what would you say, how important would you say off-season, training is for a program, and what exactly do you do as your program, and obviously my program, in the off-season?
Well, the tough thing is you came through at the end of COVID too. So there was a bunch of different things that we had to stop in the off season, and now we're pretty much full go on everything that we do. I think it is absolutely, well, it's the difference between having a decent team and a good team. The difference between having a good team and a great team. The commitment. At Fraser, I know you've heard me say this quite a few times. I want every player to play every sport and just compete at every sport. I don't want you to single out. I don't want you to be only a football player. But that doesn't mean that you can't get your work in. And we talk about, as sophomores and freshmen, sophomores and freshmen haven't gotten into the weight room very much. So that's where I talk about potential. Those potentials are good football players, right? Mm-hmm. But if he's even with another kid on a different team, if that kid on the other team is lifting the weights and doing the work and working the agilities and all that, and you don't, that kid's going to be better than you, just because of the physicalness of our sport. You have to get in the weight room. You have to get stronger. At Fraser, we're never going to be the biggest guys. We're never going to be the biggest guys. We don't have huge kids. But what we do have is good young men who need to work hard. And you give me 11 kids with decent talent but work their butts off, I'll take that any single day. Any single day. You get a group that will work their tail off, I'll show you a successful group. I really will. But it's got to be commitment, it's got to have discipline, and you got to have toughness. Off season, also, we talk about this year, we're bringing back what we used to do. We're going to start doing monthly um, get-togethers to make sure it's not just the weight room type of it or the running type of it. We're going to go do some things and have some fun, try to get to know each other a little bit more than just on a football field and in a weight room. I think that's quite important too, for coaches and for players.
Mm-hmm. So from like a coaching standpoint, what exactly do you do like behind closed doors that like players and like obviously the community doesn't see that puts your team ahead?
Oh, there is the time. Some things that people really truly don't understand. See, the tough thing about football is everyone watches football, so everyone thinks they know football, and I'm sure some people do, right? But everyone's got an opinion on it. Our coaches, we'll just talk about the season. Our coaches are watching film Saturday morning and Saturday night, and then we are meeting Sunday night for about 4 hours to go over our game plan for the week. We then talk on Monday after practice also. During the off season, as a matter of fact, we're going to meet as a staff next week, and then we probably will have monthly meetings. We will go to the conferences, to the clinics, to talk to other coaches, see what we like, and try to build what will work for our team. And then we'll get together quite a bit to get to know each other better also.
So talking about coaching clinics, like so what exactly like can you expect going to one of those clinics?
They got a whole array of things. There's so much things now that are online or in person. You have every college in the state of Michigan will do some kind of thing. Like, for example, University of Michigan comes into the Glacier Clinic every other year, I think, and they have their offensive line coach talking one time, wide receiver coach, quarterback coach, linebacking coach, defensive line coach, and you go where your position is that you're planning on coaching, and you're trying to pick up something. You're always trying to pick up something, and it might be something that you do. Just saying it different might help you with a kid. I only have, I say this as a teacher too. I'm explaining this certain way. Is there anyone else that can explain it in a different way that maybe someone could understand better? And that's what you try to do with football too. You might talk about there's 12 words for the same thing. I mean, people get in arguments about verbiage all the time when you're talking about football, but you're trying to pick up those type of things. And as a head coach, I like to go to other head coaches clinics, and there's high school coaches too that do things. And I like to see what they do for program building and what they like to do for off season, and how they structure different things. I think is a very good thing to go look at.
So kind of bouncing off that idea, what exactly do you do to improve yourself and your coaching staff just overall as coaches?
We keep on trying to learn every chance we possibly can. No one's an expert. Football, you steal stuff. There's no doubt about it. You steal stuff. Kids know one of our pass plays this year. I took it from Utica because they ripped us in the scrimmage. Like, we couldn't cover it. Guess what? I'm running that, right?
Yeah.
That's what we try to do every single time. And we also have to, as a head coach, I have to evaluate all the coaches, and I've got to talk to them about their goals and their aspirations, but also what I would think they should improve on or what they did a great job on. As the head coach, I have to do that, and as the head coach, I always have to self-evaluate. This worked, this didn't work. How can we make it better? You do that. You do that almost day by day as a football coach, to make sure that that you feel you're doing whatever it takes to be successful.
So what do you say or what would you say like are the main qualities that you need to be a successful high school head coach?
Passion. I think you have to have a love for the game. I think you have to have a passion for the game. I think you have to be a competitive person. And I think you have to have empathy. I think you got to care. And even more important than that, I think you need to make sure your players know you care. There's nothing wrong with saying the words "I love you," and it's some people look at you like you're weird when you do that sort of stuff. No, I don't lie. I don't ever lie to my players. I don't try to BS them. I try to tell them the truth on everything that we talk about. And yeah, when I say I love you, I love you. You guys are working your butts off for me. I love you. You guys play for Fraser. We're all together. We're all alumni. And sometime we will be alumni. We will be former players. We'll be former coaches. But we all had a love for this school and for that program. And I think you have to build relationships with your players. I think it is so important for position coaches to have relationships with their positions. And I think it's important for as the head coach, you have to be kind of the heavy once in a while. You have to be the bad cop because you're the one that's, ultimately everyone goes to.
Mm-hmm.
But you still have relationships, and you have to help teach your players that when you get off the field, that was if you got yelled at by me, that was on the field. Next day is a new day. We're in this together. We're a family. And families sometimes they get mad at each other. Families sometimes try to motivate you in different ways. And it's nothing against the person. It's not attacking the person's soul. It is trying to make that person better. And you hear the old adage of that if the coach stops yelling at you, start worrying. I really believe that because that you got to care for those kids. It doesn't matter what that kid is. Go up and talk to them and ask them how their family is. Ask them how they're doing that day. You got to make sure you know everything about your players.
Mm-hmm. So what does like a daily game day routine look like from a coaching standpoint? Because obviously the players get to the field at like 5, they warm up, they do everything to get ready, and then they play. But from a coaching standpoint, what do you do from the end of this like the school day to the start of the game?
No, I'm a weird guy. I'm a little weird. Your coaches, I am wound up tighter than any other person on the planet, and you playing for me know that. I'm a little edgy when it comes to game day. You know why? When you had to play, when I used to play, I worried about me. You worried about your teammates, you worried about, but I had to worry about myself. I had to make sure that I played well, right? As a coach, this is the hardest thing that really got me mentally. I'm worried about everyone else. I'm worried about everything. Is the camera working? Is the ball's out for pregame right? Are the kids dressed properly? All those things are going in your head during it. So I think I don't sleep very much the night before. I don't sleep very much the night after. I got to get better at that because I'm constantly thinking about those sort of things. But when I get to the game, I try to be very, very calm at the start of the game. I think players feed off of coaches. If a coach is a raving lunatic on the sideline, the players are starting to be raving lunatics on the sidelines. So I try to be calmer than what I'm really feeling inside. But at the same time, I'm emotional. So I get done with school. My wife picks up the kids. I come home and I pack about 7 million different types of clothes because I don't know what I'm going to wear, and I always wear the same thing over and over again anyway. And then I sit there and we get stuff ready, but I like relaxing, letting the kids get ready, just making sure they're okay. Everyone knows what time's going on, what we're doing, and when we're doing it, and let's go play football.
Wait, so you said you pack more than one outfit for?
Oh, I pack like 6 outfits.
I don't know if I've ever seen you wear the like you have like the blue like the blue like stripe up here and the gray shirt. I've only seen you wear that on game day. That with the khaki pants.
Yep, I wear khaki pants I'm very superstitious too. I have the same khaki pants. I've been wearing the same khaki pants for the last I would say 6 years. I have the same shoes, but I have different tops that I put on, and I pack them in my bag. But I end up wearing the same thing. And if we win, that thing's never coming off. It doesn't matter what the weather is. I'm wearing the same exact thing I wore the week before.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like that. Yes.
Makes sense. So, you were an offensive coordinator before you were a head coach, right?
I've been an offensive coordinator. I've been a defensive coordinator. I've coached everything under the sun.
What would you say is the biggest difference from a role like offensive coordinator and then obviously being the head coach of a program?
Final decisions. Final decisions is always, I don't have anyone to give a final decision or look to for a final decision. It's my decision. When you're a coordinator, for example, defensively, if I was when I was a defensive coordinator, heat of the battle, close game, you'd go up to the head coach. You wouldn't say exactly what play do you want me to run. You'd go up to him and say, you want me to get after him or you want me to take it easy? Something like that. So then they have an idea of what you're doing because it's ultimately their decision. You know, big things that go up to the head coach every single time. You know, disciplinary problems or situations or decisions on if someone gets injured, who's going in. Those all run through the head coach. And it as an assistant, it's a heck of a lot easier getting the yes or no from your boss. But when you're the boss, you're making that decision. You ask for input from your coaches, but at the end, you're making that decision.
So, what exactly do the coaches that are up in the box do, like up in the press box during the game?
Offensive guys are looking. They all have different jobs. Defensive guys are looking to see what the formation is and what the personnel is because we try to figure out what they're going to do by personnel and formation. That's the biggest thing for a defense, and then where we screwed up at and what we need to fix. Offensively, if you're up there in the box for offense, they're telling us where they're lining up, and by where they're lining up, we know what we can run. Which way to run it. They're also up there giving suggestions about what plays we have. And hey, we've got this right now, or we got this if we run this first. So those are the conversations that are going on from the guys in the box.
So how do you handle pressure, whether it's coming from like the school management or the fans?
That's a good one. That's a real good question because there is a lot of pressure.
Thank you.
You have administration that want to do what they want to do. You've got parents that have their own ideas. You have players that have their own ideas, and then you have your own self pressure. I don't think there's anyone that puts more pressure on me than myself. How do you handle it? You know what? The biggest part of it is I learned after my first couple of years of being a head coach because you have no idea what you got yourself into. Everyone thinks that they know exactly how to handle it. And when they become head coach, it's like, wow, you never understood what you had to deal with. I learned a couple years into it is to be honest as possible. Just be honest, lay it out there, be very truthful. Don't try to sugarcoat it. Don't try and hurt people's feelings, but tell them exactly the way it is. I think people respect that, and you know, it's not much that they can say once you say that sort of stuff. You know, listen, this is the way I see it, and until further notice, that's the way we're going to go with it. But pressure's there. I mean, there's no doubt about it. Pressure's there, but I enjoy it. And, you know, telling you before the game, you know, being wound up like I am, or it's a nervousness, it's an excitement. It's pressure. It's all of those things. I love it. I mean, the bottom line is you got to love it. If I didn't have those feelings before a game, if it was just, walk out there and, okay, we're playing a football game. If that was my feelings going into it, I'd get out of the business because that's what I got in for, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing better than standing underneath our tunnel just before we go out of the game, just before we go out for the game and there's introductions. And looking out in that tunnel and you see all those people on the field and you hear all the noises in the stands and you see all those different things going on. You're at a high school football game on a Friday night. I think it's the coolest feeling in the world. Absolute coolest feeling in the world. So I think you have to embrace it. You embrace the pressure. Now, I'm not
Mm-hmm.
going to lie to you. Winning helps on pressure. Winning definitely helps, but you got to embrace it. It's going to be there regardless if you win or you lose.
Mm-hmm. So obviously failure happens in sports, especially like coaching. And so like what are some of the lessons that you've learned from failure?
I've learned everything from failure, to be terribly honest with you. You learn when you start coaching as a young guy, you always think you can do it better than the person next to you, right? You've got the world at your fingertips type of stuff. And you learn. I've had great guys I've worked for. As an assistant coach, I have had just awesome head coaches. But there's some things that you would do differently than what they do, right? So you learn what you like what they did and what you see you don't like what they did. So when you have failure, you're doing that to yourself now. So now you're sitting there going, okay, what worked? What didn't work? There's the empathy that goes involved in it. You have to know the feeling of your players. The players don't want to fail either. Coaches don't want to fail. Players don't want to fail. You the hardest thing, or I think the number one thing that the reason why football is such a great sport is because it finds you. It'll give you failure. You will fail at certain times. How do you pick up? How do you get back up on there? I think it's such a great analogy for life. I think that's why I love the sport so much. Everyone has to work together. When you get knocked down, you got to get back up. You got to not let that thing happen to you again. I don't care how you do it. You don't let it happen. Sometimes you're playing a bigger guy, and he pushes you down he drives you 10 yards. What are you going to do to not let him do that again? You got to get a little bit tougher. You got to get a little bit lower. Got to come
Mm-hmm.
off the ball a little bit harder. All of those things. I think it's a great metaphor for life. And as a coach, failure is what kicks you in the butt to keep on going and get better. You can
Mm-hmm.
never rest. Never rest on your laurels. There's great coaches out there, but none of them know everything. And all coaches think they work the hardest. They'll tell you, I work so darn hard. Da, 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 da. We all work hard. I have never met a coach that doesn't work hard, that doesn't
Mm-hmm.
work on it. And we just keep on grinding.
Mm-hmm. So kind of doing a quick 180 from that question. What is the greatest accomplishment that or greatest achievement that you have accomplished?
Are we talking about coaching?
Uh sure. Give us your coaching one, then give us just your life one.
Well, my listen, I have my dream job. It's my job that I wanted since I was 16 years old. When I started playing football for Fraser, I wanted to be the head football coach at Fraser, and that's the only thing I've ever wanted. I mean, that was my dream job, to be terribly honest with you. I have that now. Um, that in itself is an accomplishment, but being able to see success, to see certain kids grow up and be the men that that they could be, is my greatest accomplishment on the football field. Wins and losses. I've been on 9-0 teams. I've been on 0-9 teams. I've been on both sides. Um, so wins and losses, while they're very important, That's not why you get into it. That's the fun byproduct of it, I would say. Um, but it's watching these young men grow to be good young men. I just, that's my best accomplishment. That's what I love to see. I'm not going to mention names, but for you, for example, I can mention you because you're interviewing me. I loved how you didn't know a darn thing about football when you started off, and then by your senior year, you knew what you were trying to do. You were trying to be the best that you could possibly be by it.
Mm-hmm.
That's wonderful for me. Uh, Accomplishment outside is my family. It's my girls, my wife, and my two girls. Those are my best accomplishments.
Mm-hmm. So, in your career, what is the most, this is kind of a similar question. What's the most successful team that you have been a part of the coaching staff for?
Most successful team that I've been on a coaching staff for. I've made the playoffs uh, two times here and three times, or was it three times? Three times at Cousino. Won the white division my first year at Cousino as an assistant coach. That was a fun team to watch. Your junior year was a fun team to watch. Um, if we didn't have 10 more people in our school district, I'd really like to see what we would have done in the playoffs.
I know.
But we were 10 people high enough, and we get to go play Stevenson, which is fine. It's fine. You got to play whoever you got to play.
Mm-hmm.
You got to
That
play
was,
whoever you got to play. That's just the way it is. But those are accomplishments. And I mean, I as a player, I was at we made it to the semifinals. I mean, and I remember that feeling. I'll always remember that feeling. But guess what? I don't remember the games very much. I don't. And that's why I try to teach my my players. You'll remember some of them, yeah. I mean, I remember a couple of them. There's no doubt about it. I don't remember them all, but I remember who was playing with me. I remember the guys that I played for. I remember the coaches that helped me out along the way.
mm-hmm.
When we played Stevenson at our place, Coach Ray Barr, who was the head coach for Fraser from 1989 until 2004, who was my head coach, came. And he's a little bit older now, but it was awesome to see him. Gave him a big hug. Very much a role model of mine, and that's the stuff that I'm proud of, or the achievements I'm proud of, is keeping that lineage going.
Mm-hmm. So, kind of bouncing with that, that you mentioned. So, who are some of the bigger mentors, and what effect have they had on your life and coaching career?
Oh, I've had quite a few. Ray Barr is one of the main ones. He was my high school coach, and he was my first head coach as an assistant when I started coaching. Coaching wise, I worked with Mike Powell, who was the head coach at Cousino for 15 years and made it to the state semifinals with them. That's the guy I went with after I left Fraser, and I went to Anchor Bay with him also. Learned a lot from him. What I learned most about him is how to care for your coaches. Him as a boss, he made sure that his coaches were good. And I learned a lot, X's and O's. And when you're talking about X's, you learn it from a lot of different people. You strike friendships up in these when you're in the coaching ranks. And hey, how you do that? When it talks about X's and O's, I talk to Justin Newcomb from Stevenson all the time. I mean, we grew up kind of together at Cousino. I've got, Coach Iwaniki was one of my coaches, who's now one of my assistants. Bounce things through him. Coach Daly's been doing it a long time. Bounce things through him. But you reach out, Coach Street from Lakeview. We talk football quite a bit. Coach Milanoff from Mott, I talk to him quite a bit. And you pick up stuff as you're going to fit you. And all those guys are very important. But if I had to go the most important guys, it was the head coaches that I worked under.
Mm-hmm. So this is my or actually, I have two more questions. So, what is a book that you would recommend that people that want to end up coaching should read?
Oh, I hate this question. I I hate this question more than anything because it is the winning circle, Ohio State. I think that's a very good book to talk about leadership and teamwork. Uh, all of that stuff is awesome. Probably about 15 years old now. I believe Trussell wrote it. Uh, I'm a big Michigan fan, but The Winning Circle is a very very good book to read.
Didn't help him much this year, huh?
That's fine. That's fine with me.
And then my final question is, what's advice that you would have for people that want to get into the coaching industry and just want to coach?
Just get involved to start off with. Just get involved. Any coach will take somebody who's willing to work and who's willing to learn. The enthusiasm, when I'm looking for young guys to coach in my program, I'm looking for people that are enthusiastic and willing to learn. Sometimes you get hired at the bottom of the barrel, and sometimes there's crappy jobs for coaches too. There's stuff that we have to do that, not everyone wants to do every single time. But you work your way up and you learn and you pay attention and you stay focused and you're there. Some young coaches don't realize how much time it takes to actually coach, and how much things you have to do off the field, and they learn that. And if you get a kid or a young man, I want to say kid, if you get a young man who wants to coach and is enthusiastic and willing to put the work in and willing to learn, you're going to make it. You're going to do something with yourself on it. It's not rocket science. Once you get the hang of it, it's not rocket science. You can be a good coach by being able to know your position and then work from there. And the other thing I would say is try, if you have the ability to coach other things, you coach other things. It gives you the perspective to get to the higher level of being a coordinator or a head coach. I've coached every position, offense and defense. I've coached every single position, but you got to put the work in before you start coaching that position. You got to learn, you got to go to clinics, you got to ask people, you got to look for drills, because kids know when you don't know exactly what you're talking about. So you got to make sure you know what you're talking about when you're doing it. But it's rewarding passion and profession. Such a rewarding one. I mean, it's not always all good, and it's not always all bad, and it's not always all successful, and it's all not always failure. It's everything mixed in. It's a part of life. But we're having a shortage of young men getting into the profession, and it really needs to happen because we need some young blood.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks so much for doing this, Coach. This was awesome. Really enjoyed it.
I appreciate you.
I'd like to thank Coach Sklad for coming on to today's show. This was such a fun interview and one that I was waiting for a long time. Make sure to leave a like and a comment, catch up on any episodes that you've missed. As always, my name is Calvin Custance, and this is The Blueprint.